Hello and welcome to Cosmological Arguments. I'm your host, John Bannan. Debunking Atheism, Volume 10. In this video, I want to go over quantum entanglement and retrocausality. Quantum entanglement and retrocausality are two things given to us from physics, specifically the study of quantum mechanics in physics. That is, the study of the smallest things, the microscale. Now, quantum entanglement is a very strange phenomenon, but it's true nonetheless. Albert Einstein considered it spooky action at a distance. And essentially, what it means is that particles, atoms, things actually can become entangled. And because of this, they share the same quantum state. It's an identical quantum state when they're entangled. So, quantum entanglement is a quantum mechanical phenomenon in which the quantum states of two or more objects have to be described with reference to each other, even though the individual objects may be spatially separated. When two particles, like a pair of electrons, are entangled, it's impossible to measure one without learning something about the other. Their properties, like momentum and position, are inextricably linked, regardless of the distance of separation. So, what this means is you could entangle, let's say, two particles. You bring them together, you entangle them, and then you separate them. And you can separate them at any distance you want, even on either side of the universe. And what happens is that when you measure one, you can know with certainty what the measurement of the other one will be. So there's this correlation between these two particles once they're entangled, regardless of distance, where if one is one way in a measurement, the other one's got to be that way as well. And the question is, well, how does this other particle know what to be? If it's across the universe, how does it know what this has been measured to be? Uh, so it seems to be that there's some sort of instantaneous uh, communication between these two particles over even the distance of a universe. So how is that possible? Since the speed of light or the speed of causality absolutely prevents that sort of communication between particles at such a great distance, that sort of instantaneous communication. And not only that, they're separated. So how could they be communicating with one another? Is there some invisible string connecting them that allows this communication? Actually, there's a suggestion. One possibility is there's some sort of quantum wormhole string connecting these two that are allowing this instantaneous communication. But that hasn't been proven. But nonetheless, there does seem to be this serious uh, communication faster than the speed of light between these entangled particles. So, how does that happen? And what's the explanation for it? No one knows. All the explanations are exotic. but there's been no classical, no explanation that fits within classical quantum mechanics to explain this spooky action at a distance, even though it does in fact occur. It's real. According to its laws, nature's building blocks are simultaneously waves and particles with no definite location in space. It takes an outside system observing or measuring them to push them to choose a definitive state. An entangled particle seems to affect one another's choices instantaneously, no matter how far apart they are. Experiments using Bell's inequality on entangled particles imply that this quantum weirdness is really the result of a universe where everything is predetermined. So there's this Bell's theorem, this Bell's inequality, which is a test for whether some sort of quantum mechanical phenomenon can fit within classical quantum mechanics. And if you violate Bell's inequality, then it's not it's something else besides classical quantum mechanics. And quantum entanglement does violate Bell's inequality. And it shows that there is, in fact, something very strange going on in quantum entanglement. And the question is, well, what is it? And there have been many suggestions that there are hidden variables in classical quantum mechanics that could explain uh, quantum entanglement, but no one has proven it or come up with a good uh, hidden variable that can explain this. Doesn't mean there isn't. It's just no one seems to have a clue as to how this actually works. A hidden variable is something is a classical explanation for why something is happening. It's just that it's hidden. You can't see it. It's there. You just don't know it's there. And until somebody finds it, you're not going to know what it is. Um, so the suggestion is that quantum entanglement shows that the B theory of time or the block universe theory is real because it's indicating that everything is predetermined. So one explanation for that instantaneous communication is that there is no instantaneous communication. That entangled particle, it's already been predetermined to be set at whatever measurement is found. Um, so, in other words, it already knows what it's supposed to do. It's not communicating with this other particle. It's already preset. It's already cooked in the books, and that's exactly what the block universe is. It's a predetermined block universe where each slice of space time is a part of that block universe, and it's all predetermined. It's all set. It's a set it and forget it sort of universe where you don't change, nothing changes. There's no time. Time and change are just illusions, and the necessity of God is really just limited to the creation of the block universe in the Big Bang. And that's it. And then once God creates the block universe in the Big Bang, he simply walks away and doesn't have any more interaction with that particular universe. It's all been cooked in already. So, quantum entanglement is often shown as proof of the block universe. Um, However, what I'm telling you is it isn't actually proof of the block universe. There are other explanations, and particularly one that I want to discuss is God. God is, in fact, a hidden variable that can explain quantum entanglement. So, um, how would God explain this seemingly instantaneous communication between entangled particles? Oh, well, simple. Under occasionalism, the idea is that God creates, destroys, recreates, destroys, recreates the entire universe, every moment of physical reality, every moment of space time, continuously in a sequence through a timeless act. So the present moment that we experience is really this creation of God of this particular, uh, essentially a segment, even though it's a timeless segment, but each segment of space time. So this theory of occasionalism could explain how these distant particles could know what's going on with each other, even though they can't communicate with each other faster than the speed of light. So how's it happen? Quite simple. The communication is really God's knowledge. So when you have these particles entangled and separated even by the length of the universe, and this one is measured, and this one comes up exactly the same, you can explain that because God, through occasionalism, is the one that sets this one to coincide with this one. So God knows what this one is going to be, so he sets this one to be exactly the same. God's not subject to the speed of light and not subject to the speed of causality, and can do that through occasionalism. So when God creates a certain segment of space-time and he creates this one to be a certain measurement, at the same time he creates this one to be the same measurement. So God can be that hidden variable through occasionalism. Now, you won't hear physicists talking about exploring the idea that God could be a hidden variable. And that's because they know they can't prove the existence of God. So it doesn't fit within science anyway. So it's really a no-go or non-starter. It's unverifiable. You can't scientifically verify that God is the hidden variable that permits these entangled particles to simultaneously know what the other one's doing, even a universe apart. So science is not going to say God is the hidden variable, even though God is the hidden variable. Um, in addition, occasionalism itself, this idea that each moment of space time, this segment of space time is created, destroyed, recreated, destroyed, created again, and that there's no time in between. Even though that can give the impression of a continuum, just like relativity and just like the Black universe, but it's not a continuum because the present moment is this discrete segment of creation. Nevertheless, that's also unverifiable. Science can't prove that that's the case either, because you would have to leave the universe into some greater space to see these segments being created. And these segments are not created in any sort of greater universe or greater time. So so even if you could get there, you wouldn't see it anyway, because that's not how it works. These aren't segments created in time. They're timeless acts. They don't have a connection in some sort of greater realm. Their only connection is their similarity to each other, like the frames of a movie film, for instance. So the whole idea of God as the hidden variable and God using occasionalism to accomplish uh, um, this quantum entanglement, it's unverifiable. It's not, science couldn't prove it or disprove it. So physicists are not going to talk about that possibility because they can't prove it. There's no experiment they can set up to prove that that's the case. But that doesn't mean it's not the case. And God could do that. So um, the hidden variable is God. Another reason God is necessary It's another proof of God. There's a cosmological argument, which is the argument from time, which proves God through through the existence of time, and occasionalism. So this is just an aspect of that cosmological argument, the argument from time. So God through occasionalism can give the impression that the block universe is real, but that doesn't mean that the block universe is real. Occasionalism can mimic a block universe or give the impression that a block universe is real, or even give the impression that the universe is a predetermined thing without time or change. It can give that impression, but that doesn't mean that the block universe is real. Occasionalism creates a present moment. It actually creates time, whereas the block universe, time is an illusion, change is an illusion. So it's obvious to anybody who's alive that time and change is a real thing. So why would you believe the block universe is a real thing when you have an alternate explanation of occasionalism, which is completely compatible with relativity and yet also explains things like why time is real and change is real? And it also explains how quantum entanglement can occur. Um, However, the physicists are not about to claim that God is a hidden variable. So they're going to claim something else. And what are they claiming? Well, one of the most popular explanations for quantum entanglement is something called retrocausality. Retrocausality is the idea that the future decides the past, and the past decides the future. Uh, it's also called backward causation. It would mean a particle could carry the action of its measurements back in time to when it was entangled, affecting its partner. No faster than light message is needed. So, retrocausality in quantum mechanics would explain the entanglement of two particles as this. It would say, well, this future action, let's say you have these entangled particles, you separate them from, to the distance of the known universe, and you measure this one, and you know that this one's going to come up with the same measurement. It's going to be in the same state. So how did that happen without faster than light communication? Well, retrocausality would say that when these particles were together and they were first entangled, this future action of its measurement went back in time and imparted that information on its partner particle when it was first entangled. And when it was separated, because that future information was sent back to the past when they were a partner and entangled, because when this one is set, this one knows what to be set at. So that's retrocausal. That's the future affecting the past back when they were entangled. So that's the explanation is the future affecting the past. Now, that's a possible explanation. I frankly don't believe that that's the case. However, there's still problems with this idea of retrocausality. Now, a lot of atheists will use retrocausality to get rid of God. And they'll do it by saying, aha, well, retrocausality proves that the block universe must be real. And if the block universe is real, then there's no need for a cause in time. Well, you could still say that you still need a God to initially cause the block universe, but all right, but it doesn't help God's case. And they'll also say, aha, well, here's a situation where you can have the future cause the past, and the past cause the future. So that creates a situation of the possibility of self-creation. The future can go back into the past and create itself. And then the past creates that future. That's self-creation. And if you have self-creation, what do you need God for? You don't, because the thing is uncaused. It creates itself. It's, well, I shouldn't say it's uncaused, but it creates itself. It's self-created. And that effectively eliminates the need for God. You don't need a God to create something which can create itself. Now, self-creation is impossible and illogical. That something, in order for something to create itself, it would have to exist before itself in order to create itself, which makes no sense at all. And if the thing is, and for something that is contingent on itself for its own creation, then it's a contingent being. Where's the thing that creates it? So self-creation is a self-defeating, impossible proposition. But nonetheless, retrocausality, if it's true, if in fact the future can go back to the past, then you can make the argument that self-creation is actually real and not impossible. And atheists do that very thing with this idea of retrocausality in quantum mechanics. So, well, okay, is this possible? Well, the answer is no, it's not. And the reason is because even if you assumed retrocausality was real and that it wasn't caused by God through occasionalism, and that there really is a block universe and the past really does exist, if you assume all those things, then in order for the past, or in order for the future to affect the past, the future would have to send information to the past. It would have to tell it what to do, and that's information. But retrocausality doesn't permit information or communication into the past. And the reason is because it would violate the speed of causality, or the speed of light. It would be faster than light could carry a communication even into the past. So physics agrees that retrocausality does not mean you can communicate with the past. And because, even if it was real, and because you can't communicate with the past, you can't send information to the past. Therefore, the future couldn't create the past, because you can't send information to the past to create anything. So retrocausality is an interesting thing, but because it still can't send messages or information into the past, then you can't use it as a basis to claim that the universe was self-created. Another problem would be this. Some people claim, some people make some pretty wild claims. And one of the wild atheistic claims is really something called universal consciousness. And this is the idea that consciousness is what creates reality. And it's based on quantum mechanics and the idea that in order for the collapse of the wave function to occur, you need an observer. You need a conscious observer. So until there's a conscious observer, then particles don't exist. It's just a probability distribution. It's not a real thing. It's not a reality until there's an observer. So there are some atheists who will claim that consciousness is necessary for the universe to collapse, for the wave function to collapse into reality. Well, this presents an obvious problem, which is the universe is 13.8 billion years old, but conscious life is not that old. So how could consciousness determine the existence of reality if it didn't exist for the vast majority of the history of the universe? The answer is it couldn't, unless you have some clever way of going back in time, which, again, atheists may refer to retrocausality as that method of going back in time. So you may have some atheists claim, well, consciousness allows us through retrocausality to create reality, and even created the beginning of the universe itself. So the future consciousness would be that which, through retrocausality, collapsed the wave function of the Big Bang and created the past and created the particles and the energy of the past, which result in the future, which result in the consciousness. So this is it's a science fiction theory, but a lot of atheists will push this as truth, even though it's not. So what's one fundamental problem with this idea? One fundamental problem is, if you're going to claim that retrocausality is what created the Big Bang, by the future going into the past and creating the Big Bang, then that means you would have to entangle everything in the Big Bang in order to tell the Big Bang what to do through retrocausality of those particles in the future. So you would have to entangle every particle in the universe in the future in order to use retrocausality to affect the Big Bang, or the expanded singularity in Big Bang cosmology. So how are you going to entangle every particle in the universe? How's an observer going to observe every particle in the universe? The answer is you can't. There's no way you can do that. And there's even, if that wasn't enough, that impossibility wasn't enough, there's an even greater impossibility, which is, okay, if you're going to entangle every particle that existed at the expanded singularity under Big Bang cosmology, you got to get to every particle. And at this point in time, 13.8 billion years later, some of those particles are long gone and completely inaccessible. Due to the expansion of the universe since the time of the Big Bang, some of those particles are more than 13.8 billion light years away from us, and that's because of the expansion of the universe along with the speed of light. So let's say we're over here and the universe is expanding, some of these particles over here, and the universe is expanding. Well, if you're going to observe those particles, you're going to have to get to them in order to observe them, in order to entangle them. But because of the expansion of the universe, and the best you could ever do is go the speed of light, you would never reach those particles. So even if you could go at the speed of light, you would never get to them. They're impossible to reach. Physically impossible. There's no known physics due to the expansion of the universe and the speed of light that would allow you to ever get to those particles. So you could never entangle those particles. There's no way you could do it. It's impossible. So it violates the laws of physics. It violates the speed of light and the speed of causality. And you got the expansion of the universe to deal with as well. So it's a big, fat impossibility. So this atheistic idea of consciousness, universal consciousness, using retrocausality to go back in time to collapse the wave function of the expanded singularity, and thus have the future create the past and cause the beginning of the universe, is total nonsense. It's impossible nonsense. It would be great science fiction, but it's total and absolute nonsense. Violates basic laws of physics. Can't be done. Period. So there's no way retrocausality could explain the creation of the universe from future events being sent through some sort of time travel into the past. It's an impossibility. It can't be done. Retrocausality does not eliminate the need for a God. Essentially, retrocausality it isn't even time travel, because time travel really requires information or messages to be sent into the past. And retrocausality can't do that. Uh, See, if you take two entangled particles and you separate them, and you try to force one of those particles into a certain position, you break entanglement, and this one no longer is entangled, so it doesn't position itself the way you want it to. So you can't force it. You can't use it to communicate over long distances. Uh, so while quantum entanglement has some uses in terms of quantum cryptology, quantum computing, for instance, uh, it can't be used to send data or messages into the past. You can't use quantum entanglement and retrocausality, even if retrocausality was true, to send it, send winning lottery ticket numbers to yourself in the past so that your future will be instantaneously changed and you'll be a rich man. It doesn't work that way. Time travel is not possible. It's impossible. Quantum entanglement does not involve time travel. Retrocausality does not involve time travel. And time travel itself is an impossibility rife with paradoxes. If you could time travel, you go back into the past, shoot your parents dead before you were conceived, and then you're looking over their cold dead bodies, but you're still existing. So how could that be? You killed your parents before you were born, so how could you live? And yet there you are. So because you destroyed your own future, your present your presence has no causal history. That means you've come from nothing. So that would be something from nothing, which is an impossibility. You can't get something from nothing. So time travel is an impossibility. It creates paradoxes, and no one has ever proven it to be true. And retrocausality is not time travel. It's not time travel. It's different. So be aware of that. Don't confuse time travel with retrocausality. This is a very specific theory having to do with quantum mechanics, and it doesn't involve faster than light communication, and it doesn't really involve time travel in the way that we think of it. And I explained to you its limitations. All right, so this is all very theoretical, involves quantum mechanics and physics, and you may not understand any of what I just said. But if you run into it, then you'll remember what I said if you watch this video, and you'll understand how to respond to these atheistic objections based on these physics theories. And in the end, just remember, you can't exclude God and occasionalism as a hidden variable that explains all of this. All right, take care.